What did COVID do to our mental health? Let's talk about it. Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Let's Talk About It podcast by SafeTalk, where we cover all things mental health that are rarely talked about. And speaking of rare topics, today we are going to be covering on an issue that people haven't really touched on lately, which is about COVID, specifically mental health before and after COVID. But of course, before we get into that, I want to introduce you with our new guest today, which is Miss Tapisha. Welcome, Miss Tapisha.
Hi, Fauza. Thanks for having me here.
No, thank you for coming. So for those who don't know, Miss Tapisha is from Karakara. Mm-hmm. She is a registered and licensed counselor. Mm-hmm. So how are you feeling today?
I'm good. I'm excited and, excited digging into this topic today because, like you said, it's rarely spoke about.
Yes, especially like after, because COVID is like in 2020, 2021. Mm-hmm. By now it's already 2024. Mm-hmm. So people haven't really talked about it, but I think it would be interesting to start speaking up about it again.
True.
So if you're ready, if you don't mind, can I ask like a little bit about your work background at Karakara?
Mm-hmm. So with Karakara, I mainly do individual sessions. Mm-hmm. So I have one-on-one sessions with clients as well. And I typically see individuals aged 15 and above.
Okay.
I do particularly see a lot of young adults, so they're either in school, universities, or transitioning to work life as well. Mm-hmm. So it's been an honor to walk by their sides to guide them through whatever mental health issues that they're facing as well. And on the side too, I do have my own private practice where I conduct online workshops or face-to-face workshops as well as sessions too. So it's a good mix that I'm getting in.
How many years have you worked in this field?
So if you include my training years, because I also see clients at that point of time too, it would be touching 3 years,
3 years, wow. So since 2021.
Yes.
I see. So that's great. And you mentioned that you were trainee as well before, right, with Karakara. And we even had this discussion before this podcast session that you were a trainee during the pandemic.
Yes.
If you don't mind, can you like share a little bit your experience during that time?
So like many other students, right, I was doing my master's at that point of time, my master's in counseling. Yeah. So we were required to do our practicum and internship outside of campus as well. But because of the pandemic, the whole world shut down. Yeah. So we can't really do that. And we had to shift online everything. So even our classes, our sessions as well that we would have with clients too, they were all done online. I think personally it was definitely a change for me because a lot of things that we were introduced and thought about in our master's program was mainly in-person sessions, what to look out for, the non-verbal cues, things like that. So it was tricky for me initially to look out for those non-verbal cues online, especially during online therapy. But I think I had a lot of exposure at that point of time that now I'm pretty comfortable with having online sessions as well. And I mainly do online sessions too.
So now you have like both experience from both sides, in person and online. And you said the non-verbal cues, because even I had like experience going to therapy myself. And at first I was like, okay, I'm too scared to go in person, so I want to go online therapy. And then even my therapist said, I think it's better if you go for in person. And I can see the difference. Like the therapists were able to catch on like my body language and how anxious I was during the session. So I could imagine that most therapists were also have to adapt to that change to only online, right?
Because the thing with online is you only see like up until here, right? You don't really see what's happening or taking a person as a whole, right? So even though yes, you can connect with someone online, it's tiny bit different if you do it in person as well. So that's why I like to have that mix of both. So I'm in touch with both online and in-person therapies as well.
Yeah. But by now you're used to it.
Yes.
And so I imagine you have already handled like so many cases, right? But specifically during that time of pandemic and lockdown, what would you say the major like mental health challenges that people were had to go through? Was it depression, anxiety?
I think at that point of time, I noticed a lot of people were open to therapy, which is great because, with the stigma around, it prevents people from seeking help. But interestingly, because of the pandemic, a lot of people were more open to it. So I saw a lot of clients going through various of issues actually. So, like you said, depression, anxiety. There were a lot of fears happening at that point of time, and not to mention there was a lot of trauma and abuse happening too, marital abuse, sexual abuse as well, and even some clients were going through a lot of suicidal thoughts at that point of time too. Granted, it was a very difficult time for all of us too. So it was a bit sad to see that everyone's going through that as well. But I think it was mainly due to everyone being stuck at home together. Because if you eliminate going to work or going to school, then you're forced to spend time together at home with either your family members, your roommates, or even sometimes some of us were living alone. So some amount of loneliness was there, isolation too. So there's a lot of issues that people were going through at that point of time
from the lockdown. And not to mention that is the, like, I would say, like, the side effects from being isolated. But there's also like a group of people who unfortunately and sadly had to go through like grief, like from their family members dying from COVID and stuff like that. And you can see also on the news where people actually lost like most of their family members, and which ended up with like suicidal thoughts and even like suicidal cases. So that is unfortunately like the reality during that time. And if you know, like, from your observation, what would you say, like, the demographics, like, who were the main people who were affected by this? Was it like teens, parents, workers, or business owners?
I think for me personally, it's tough to pinpoint which demographics had it worse, because I feel like the pandemic affected us all one way or another.
True.
So at that point of time, healthcare workers were severely burnt out because they hardly have enough time to rest, and they were at high risk of spreading COVID-19 to either their loved ones or people that they know. So that was difficult for them too. But at the same time, neurodivergent individuals or people with disabilities without access to basic necessities or healthcare or even mental health care as well, that would have disrupted their lives a lot too. At the same time, I think a big group of individuals that got affected by this was children and teenagers, college, uni students, and students in general, right? Because what was supposed to be like the best year of their lives, studying, gaining new friends, new experiences, unfortunately became the worst year of their lives, years, unfortunately, because they didn't get the opportunity to like mingle, and celebrate, gain new experiences, socialize with other people as well. So that's why I feel it's a little bit difficult to pinpoint who had it worst.
It's more of a matter like this group has to go through this type of challenge, and this another group is a different type of challenge, right? And like you said, like for younger people, I noticed, because at that time I remember watching like on social media, there was like high school kids, they're like, oh, I'm so sad I couldn't go to prom, or I couldn't go to like graduation, and then people were in the comments like, oh, people are dying, why are you sad about this? But then it's like, it's true, like it is sad, because for them that's the thing that they were looking for, and then it's taken from them, so it is still valid for them to feel sad about it, right?
True. Like even there was online graduations at that point of time, and again, if you've been working so hard for the last couple of years, that's something that you're looking forward to, right? But in the end, your graduation ceremony was just like a screen on Zoom with a hand.
I even remember people were doing like Minecraft graduation. I don't know if you know that.
Oh wow.
So everything was online, right?
Yeah. I guess everyone had to do these kind of things to help them adapt and to help them manage their own emotions in their way as well, to make them feel like, hey, you know what, despite there being a pandemic, we can still slowly move on in our own ways, or slowly adapt to this in our own ways as well.
And also, what's your opinion on like people who dismiss others for their emotions? Oh, I'm sad that I couldn't attend this events because of COVID. Like, is it valid for them to like just simply dismiss other people like that?
I think if for those people, I feel like there could be some underlying things that they are personally going through too. So when they see people feeling sad over little things, or like celebrating little milestones, maybe they feel like, oh, why aren't they talking about the more important things, more important issues? So I understand where they're coming from. But at the same time, for those who feel like they should celebrate these little moments, I feel that's their only way to keep positive, or like to be grateful for the little things and the little moments in lives. I know it's little things, but
Yeah.
they eventually add up and they would improve your mood in some ways as well.
Yeah.
I guess that's how they self-soothe.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, for those people who are commenting on these little things,
Yeah.
maybe that's in some ways them self-soothing.
Right. That's like that's because, like you said, there's already like underlying issues that they need to go through, and then they're kind of like projecting on other people.
Correct.
Yeah. And so that was the thing, right? I forgot to ask you as well. Like you said, therapists handling therapy sessions online. How about like clients who were already used to like in-person therapy sessions? Did they have troubles like adapting to online sessions?
So at that point of time, because I was a trainee, the clients that I saw, they were already online clients.
Oh, okay.
So there wasn't
Transition.
there wasn't transition. So those that were seeing me online from day one, they were open to it and they were quite flexible. As of course, there were moments where sometimes internet's not that great,
Yeah.
or even if their devices get ruined or you can't really hear their audio or video.
Yeah.
And on instances like that, we do give them some time to get it fixed, or if it's really something that they can't solve at that point of time, if the therapist is open to reschedule, and most of them are usually open to that, then we will reschedule to another day.
I see. So it's more of like technical issues rather than the issues from the therapy itself.
That's what I've observed. It's mainly
see.
technical issues, and sometimes that would affect therapy in some way because you would see the clients getting a little frustrated, which is very normal. I mean, these technical issues always happen as
Yeah.
well. So that's why I try and validate them to say that it happens to me too,
And it's okay.
and it's perfectly fine.
Yeah. I mean, even without like therapy, even just normal call with your friend gets frustrating.
Yeah.
If you like.
True.
And we talk about like their struggles, right? The main struggles during the pandemic, like mental health struggles. And usually when there's mental health illnesses or just a regular daily life struggle, it's always important to have a good support system, right? And do you think that having close friends or family members to pay closer attention to you or look out for each other would have prevented all the mental health issues that happened during the pandemic?
I think it's a contributing factor. So it's great that if you would have people around you that can be by your side or that shoulder to lean on to give you that support. Because at that point of time, we were all, again, stuck at home, right? So sometimes it's difficult for us to socialize with others, and we tend to rely on our loved ones or our family members as well if you're living together. So it is a contributing factor. It's important to have a trusted loved one because it's again a shoulder for you to lean on. And if you have any issues, you feel like you need to talk things out, you know that they're there for you as well. At the same time, I think another contributing factor would be, and this ties to family as well, and trusted loved ones, would be awareness. So if you do have your loved ones there and they're aware of certain signs to look out for, or even little things like non-verbal cues that you're not doing great, then they can point it out to you that, hey, I notice you're feeling a little upset lately.
Like intervene before it gets worse.
Yes. So that awareness helps a lot, like you said, to intervene and to just do a quick check-in as well to see if everything's okay as well. And, through awareness through social media and even through podcasts like this as well is important, because if we are unaware of these little signs to look out for or things to do when someone needs help, then it's going to be tricky for us to pinpoint, okay, how do we help when we notice something's wrong with our loved ones as well.
And unfortunately, it's hard to, we can't really blame everyone for, why didn't you pay more attention to your family member? Because this is not something that is normal. I guess, in this modern era, people are more prone to, being independent, right? Number one is being independent, and most, I don't know if it's just Asian families, but people don't really share about their mental health struggles with their families. So when they go through lockdown, they're kind of forced to stay with them. So not everyone has have close bonds with their family.
Correct.
So sometimes they already had some certain struggles, and then during the lockdown they had a rough time, and then their family's like, oh, I didn't know that you're going through this. So it's hard to really point fingers, right?
Correct.
Because they're not used to it. And it's, like you said, it's a matter of awareness and having that safe space for the person who is struggling to be able to communicate. Because most of the time we tend to put the pressure and responsibility on people. Oh, you should communicate with them, or you should tell people how you're feeling. But at the same time, other people should also be welcoming to more discussions on mental health this.
And sometimes it's a bit tricky as well to want to communicate to family members. Like you said, the stigma is there, right?
Yeah.
And you don't know how they would react to it as well. So that's why I mentioned trusted loved one. So it doesn't have to be a family member too. But at the same time, if it's a struggle to open up to either your loved ones or your family members, then therapy is another good option as well, to have a professional that you can speak to as well.
Yeah.
So that you don't bottle everything up and you don't keep it all in.
Yeah. There's always you have to find the right resources for you. Whether it's, like you said, having a good support system, and sometimes even to get to psychologists or therapy, you need someone to also help you to get there. So I think this is something that everyone can learn from and improve in the future, not just for during crisis, but just in general, right? And also, I remember that you mentioned about neurodevelopmental disorders or people with disabilities, right? During that time, most people were highlighting on economics, financial, family struggles, because those are definitely the major issues during pandemic. But unfortunately, there's also a group of people who were affected by this because they already had mental health struggles prior to COVID, right? Most people were depending on routines, on a system, so they know, okay, tomorrow I have appointments, I have to get ready, today I have classes, this weekend I have this to go. But when all of this is taken away from them, they're like, oh, everything is at home, and they don't have that motivation and that sense of routine.
Correct.
So for people ADHD or autism, this kind of affects them majorly, and I've seen this in a lot of my friends as well. So did you personally notice this challenge amongst people?
So I definitely did, especially those, like you said, neurodivergent individuals, and even people with disabilities like Down syndrome, right? Like you said, a lot of these individuals, they rely a lot on routines and scheduling as well. So when you take that away, it's a huge change for them.
Yeah.
And sometimes some of these individuals, they might not be able to comprehend it to okay, why am I suddenly required to be at home when I'm supposed to have this, go to school, things like that, go to therapy and all. So it's a huge change for them that they had to navigate around. And I think having that support again is very helpful, to know that you have people that you can rely on. But it would be difficult for them it might take some time for them to manage things and to build a new routine so that they can adapt to the new norm at that point of time. And with this too, sometimes it would alleviate their pre-existing issues. Like, for example, they might notice there's this increase in anxiety or fear, loneliness as well, or even sleeping habit changes in sleeping habits too. So it was a difficult period for these individuals as well at that point of time. And like you said, not many people talk about it because I guess it's a very niche area too.
And I think if we mention this to most people, especially for those who aren't super aware about mental health, they'll be like, why would this be an issue? You're just staying home, just do everything online and you're done. But for people, that's actually a major challenge, right?
That's true, because it's not easy shifting online, first of all, and then sitting down and let's say if it's, for example, uni classes or work, right, it's not easy for them to just sit down in one space and to focus, because again, with the lack of routine and that disruption in their lives, right, it would hinder their progress, their concentration, and their productivity too. So it would take some time for them to navigate around it and realize, okay, what should I do differently to ensure that I would feel a little better when I need to attend classes or attend work meetings as well.
I see. How would you usually suggest for people, not only in this case, but people who have a major change in their routine, or maybe change from high school to university or from this workplace to another workplace, how would you usually recommend these people having this shock from the change of routine?
I think the first step is to acknowledge that the change is happening.
Yeah.
Because it can be scary. It's not nice to suddenly, have your whole world change 360 degrees, right?
Yeah.
So acknowledging it sometimes is a tricky thing to do. But once you acknowledge it and you validate your own experiences that, hey, this is going to be tricky, but I know I have the right people around me, or for example, I have the right resources around me, so I know that I will be able to adapt to the best that I can. The second thing would be, I think, to have a relook at their schedule and to see if they can break things down into smaller chunks that's easier and manageable for them to handle. That's the key word, which is easier and manageable for a specific person, because what would fit you and what would be suitable for you might not be suitable for me. So to be realistic as possible when it comes to setting goals or your schedules as well, and to include a lot of breaks in. So this again ties a little bit with awareness. So with it being the new norm and you're staying at home, right? So of course your routine would change a little, and it's more of recognizing how much is too much. So for example, okay, if it's too difficult for me to sit down for an hour's meeting, maybe I need to take breaks, 10 minutes breaks in between. And I can communicate that with my superiors or with my lecturers as well, so that they are aware of this. And even with my friends as well, so they know that I need to do this in order to take care of my mental health.
Yeah. And like you said, to be realistic so that you don't overwhelm yourself,
Yes,
right?
that's
Because
right.
we feel like, oh, why other people can do this, why can't I? But the realistic thing is to just set whatever that's possible and doable for you.
Yeah.
So that is the advice. So thank you for that advice. I think that's amazing for people who have that sort of transition. And what about, let's talk about people around them, like we said, right? Family members, friends, or even lecturers. So if, let's say, a similar event like this happened, like COVID or a crisis, let's hope that's not going to happen, but hypothetically, what are some signs that someone you care about might need some extra support?
So I would divide this into 3 areas.
Okay.
So there is emotional and behavioral science, there's physical science, and there is cognitive science. So the first one, which is emotional and behavioral science, I think certain points to look out for is if you notice someone's been isolating themselves, or they don't really want to interact with other people, the lack of social skills. And if they are showing signs of increased fear and anxiety as well, and they're having these persistent feelings of hopelessness and sadness as well. So these are some little signs to look out for in terms of emotional and behavioral science. For physical science, it would be changes in sleeping patterns or their appetites too. So if you notice they're not eating well, or the opposite, eating too much. The same goes with sleep. If they're sleeping too little or too much, then that's something to look out for. And last but not least, cognitive science would be if you notice this person is not having difficulty concentrating, and lack of concentration and memory issues in terms of different areas of their life. So it can be work, it can be school, personal life as well. So in these 3 areas, if you notice your loved one or even yourself is going through these signs, it's good to have that check-in with them or with yourself as well, just to see if, hey, is everything okay?
So let's say for people who are not used to this, not used to communicating this with their partner, even their parents or their children, what would be a method to approach them and check in with them?
For who specifically?
For someone, okay, I noticed the symptoms in this person, now how do I approach them because I feel a bit awkward?
Okay. So I think it depends on who you're speaking to. So if it's someone that you're very close to, then you can always go for the gentle way, which is, hey, I notice there's some changes in you lately. Or for example, I noticed that you've been a little bit more irritable lately, and I just want to check in to see if everything's okay. And how are you doing? We've not caught up in a while, so what's going on in your life right now? Things like that. So if you want, you can keep it general. So that's a more indirect way of doing it. A more direct way of doing it is if you're going straight to the point. Hey, I noticed that you've been struggling and feeling a little bit of hopelessness lately, and feeling a little low. Do you feel you're going through any depressive symptoms? Or
Yeah.
do you feel a little depressed as well? Do know that if you need to share anything, you can always do so with me.
Right.
So again, there's two ways of going.
Again.
I noticed this happen in
Now we have another
Now we have a
blooper. And the main key is to be gentle.
To be gentle about it.
Because, parents are like, oh, I always see you always playing games. Always
Yeah.
in your room.
You're always on your phone.
Yeah, always on your phone. Duduk dalam bilik, tak keluar pun. What are you doing? But the thing is, they care, but they don't know how to communicate that with the person. And sometimes, even if someone who cares, like your friend, you feel like, should I even ask that person? I feel like
sometimes you might feel that you're intruding in some ways. So again, I think you need to observe and see first. Like maybe give it, I would say 3 days to a week. If you still notice that it's consistently, you're noticing if your friend or loved one is feeling feelings of sadness, or there's some crying spells happening, or they're quite irritable, then you can figure out some ways to be gentle about it and to speak with your friend as well. If you find that tricky, technology is very advanced right now, right?
Yeah.
So you can always chat GPT some ways to like,
Yes.
hey, I need to suggest me some ways to be gentle. No, suggest some ways for me to ask my friend how she's doing without seeming intruding.
Yeah.
So that can be helpful as well if you feel like you don't really know how to start the conversation.
So just find whatever ways that works for that person. I think that's perfect. And we also so we already discussed a lot about the situation during pandemic. What are some long-term mental health effects of COVID? Like, do you observe any cases or your own cases where people still have that mental health effects from that during pandemic?
So based on my observation as well, I think some of us still experience social anxiety or the fear of being in large crowds, which even I'm guilty of as well, because it's still a little intimidating for me to be in a large crowd as well. And another thing I noticed that some individuals have is that they are still going through the grief of the pandemic, be it losing someone they love or going through unemployment or breakups as well. So grief being very complex, sometimes it does take some time for you to go through it and to manage those grief symptoms that you're feeling as well. And I guess another thing is that it's related to grief too, which is abuse and trauma. So if there are certain individuals who have gone through any abusive relationships during the pandemic, they would be still feeling the side effects of it at the currently, if they're still in that relationship or if they've left the relationship as well. So these are the common ones that I've noticed as well, that people are still going through, not to mention the stress and burnout from moving everything online to going back to work physically as well. So with that too, it ties to grief, because it's the grief of maybe losing that flexibility that you had previously during the pandemic, and now you're back to normal.
So people are losing, there's various types of grief that people go through, and even if it's not COVID, people still go through this on a normal daily basis, right?
That's true.
So this thing requires time, right, for people to heal after this, even though it has been like 3-4 years after the lockdown, but people still go through this. So what would you usually suggest if they're feeling, I still feel that struggle, even though like everyone has moved on, but I still feel like I'm stuck? What would you recommend?
So you brought up a good point, which is it does take time, right? As cliche as it sounds, time does heal in some ways. And I want to highlight as well that recovery is a gradual process, and it will take some time for you to not to just learn how to manage your symptoms or your the issues that you're going through, but it also requires a lot of patience on your end and learning how to be kind to yourself as well. So that's something that I would highlight, that you would need to learn how to be gentle with yourself.
Don't force yourself to like, okay, I have to move on now, I have to be responsible now.
Correct. I think on that note as well, healing is in our own timeline.
Yeah.
It should be in our own timeline and not forced by other people, or you shouldn't feel peer pressured into like, oh, this person has moved on, why haven't I done that yet?
Yeah.
Because it's an individual to individual basis as well.
Right.
Even though one thing we had in common was that we were all staying at home, but we all had our own unique experiences as well. And if you're still struggling with it, that's okay. There are people out there that are still struggling with it too, and you're not truly alone in this. Yeah.
So the one pattern that I always notice from therapists is that acknowledgement is important. Yeah.
Yes.
So acknowledging that you're having a rough time and it's okay. And
Acknowledging it's just like you're just putting a label on it.
Yeah.
And again, it sounds very small and simple, but it makes a huge difference when you put a label on it, because then you can recognize that, okay, it's actually bothering me, and I will need some time to process this as well.
Right.
And that time is totally dependent on me. And if I need to work it out with professionals, either through therapy or other forms of, other coping skills, then I would do so when I'm ready.
yeah, because most of us tend to like, oh, okay, I don't have to think about this, push that away.
Yeah.
And then it actually ends up dragging the healing process, even though we think that we're not focusing on it, but it's actually kind of like worsen our mental state.
True. Because if you find it difficult to label things, if you find it difficult to label your emotions or to label things, right? Like you said, you will tend to push it aside and you'll all accumulate. And one day, when it gets too heavy, you might either lash out or be more irritable, or you might say the wrong thing towards the wrong person as well. So to avoid that from happening, it's good to recognize it when you are able to do so as well.
Right. Intervene.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
And
like you said, that check in with yourself, essentially.
Check in with yourself, yeah. And you mentioned about social isolation being one of the major struggles for most of us. So, yeah, mental struggles has always been around, even without COVID, but social isolation added a whole new layer. So, and I know I'm not alone in feeling this, like, oh, now I have to jump back into social stuff. And especially with someone with anxiety disorder, it gets even more intense.
Yeah.
So after this social isolation, whether it's from lockdown or from a mental health episode, because I know that it doesn't just happen from lockdown. Some people have like a meltdown episode and they isolate themselves. And now they're like, okay, I have to get back to my normal routine. What are some ways we can deal with the fear of reconnecting with people face to face again?
I think a huge point would be that you need to start setting boundaries.
Okay.
So it's just realizing and keeping in mind what you're comfortable doing and what you're uncomfortable with doing, because that helps a lot, gives you a lot of perspective, because then you'll start to do things that you're only comfortable doing, and only when you're ready, then you will be like, okay, maybe I can experiment to see how much can I step out of my comfort zone.
Challenge yourself.
How much I can challenge myself. Of course, some people find that a bit tricky, and you can seek help with that through therapy as well. But again, start small. So focus on what you're comfortable with doing. So, for example, if you feel like you want to catch up with a friend face to face, but you don't like being in large crowds, so what you can do, which is within your control, is you can pick a restaurant or a cafe that you know wouldn't be crowded, and at the same time maybe go off peak hours, so that there's going to be a lesser crowd for you to deal with as well. So that's what I mean by setting boundaries as well. So keeping in mind what you're okay with doing and what you're not okay with as well.
Like you said, it's a process. Don't go like from, okay, today's lockdown, tomorrow I'm gonna have like next
party,
week, I'm gonna have like parties, meetings, everything. So, and don't be guilty with like comparing with other people. Oh, everyone can handle this, but you have to, like you said, set boundaries for yourself and be realistic.
Yeah, true. And on that note as well, practicing self-compassion is very important, because again, you need to first acknowledge that, okay, I have an issue here when it comes to being in large crowds, for example, or to have face-to-face interactions with people, because we're going to be sitting very close, and I'm not too sure if I'm comfortable with that as well. So when you acknowledge your feelings, you would know, and you're able to validate yourself that, it's okay to feel scared, and I know that I'm not the only one feeling that way. And that's where it goes back to your boundaries as well. what you're comfortable doing and what you're uncomfortable with doing too.
So don't rush the process.
Yes.
Yeah. You'll get there.
You'll get there eventually and with time as well.
Yeah.
And if you feel like you're ready, you feel more comfortable to have face-to-face interactions. But at that point of time, before you meet a friend, you start feeling anxious, or you feel those feelings popping in again. That's where relaxation techniques would help. So self-soothing techniques like some people like to take deep breaths.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about it. It actually helps. So taking a couple of deep breaths, it's actually pretty helpful to just help you regulate your emotions as well. And other self-soothing techniques that I like to introduce people to is if you're holding a beverage, you can hold yours as well. How does your glass feel in your hands?
Cold.
Cold, okay. And what does the surface feel like?
Smooth.
Smooth?
Okay.
Alright, okay. Can you take a sip?
Okay.
Okay. What do you taste in your mouth?
Water. Feels refreshing.
Feels refreshing.
Yeah.
And take a sniff and see. Do you smell anything?
No.
No? So it's mainly like water smell,
Yeah,
right? So what I'm doing here is it ties to a grounding technique which is called, maybe you've heard of it, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method.
I heard ACE.
ACE?
ACE, like acknowledging, connecting. But I heard this sort of method, like connecting with your senses to be present. Right?
So the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method is again using your senses, but it has certain steps. Okay, 5 things you see, 4 things you touch.
Yes. I actually just did this morning.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So 3 things you hear, 2 things you smell, and 1 thing you can taste in your mouth right now.
Okay.
But sometimes it's a bit tricky to remember the arrangement,
steps, the flow.
So what I like to do is with this exercise I did with your glass, right?
Okay.
You're still using your senses here.
Right.
So you did taste, you tasted your water, you're using your sense of touch. You're doing, you smelled it as well. So of course you can apply that into things that you can do at the present moment as well. So even if your beverage is water and you feel like it might not help as much, if you're eating something, or even if you're in a room like this room currently we're in right now, you can also still use your 5 senses to help you self-soothe and bring yourself to the present moment.
I see. So whatever that works, like you don't have to, what is the rule? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. As long as there's something that you can work with, then you can practice it with all your senses, right?
And you can navigate around it. So with these 2 exercises, the self-soothing one, which is using your senses, and deep breathing, it's more of you have these 2 options, so you can pick and choose. Okay, which one do I feel I need to do right now before I meet my friend? Just to help me again regulate my emotions and to calm my nerves down a little.
And I also heard that this method doesn't just help when you're like already too overwhelmed. Like even if you're just having a leisure time, you can do it too, right?
Correct. So it ties a lot to mindfulness as well. So it really brings you to the present moment, here and now, when you practice these little exercises like this. Again, sounds very simple, sounds very like, okay, why do I even need to do it? But when you actually start practicing it, it makes a huge difference, and you start to learn how to appreciate the little things in life and to learn to be grateful as well. At least that's how I practice it and notice it as well. So little things that I like to do is to help calm my nerves down sometimes is if I'm doing something for a day and maybe it's mundane or maybe it's exciting, I like to take pictures or videos, and then of the little things as well, and I call it like little moments in my life. And I'll combine all these little moments.
I think I saw on your Instagram, right?
Yes. So I just like to combine it and to put a little song behind it, and again
capture
these little moments, because I feel like a lot of us, being in a very fast-paced world, we tend to neglect or forget these little things. But like I said, when you do take the time to notice or to be in the present moment, it really helps you to just be a bit more appreciative and to be mindful as well of your surroundings and the here and now.
So like you can have your own creative ways on how you want to like meditate, right?
Yes.
Like even for myself, like your method is to do the little moments, right? And for myself, like sometimes, because I don't have like a huge group of friends, so sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna record myself and then pretend that I'm talking to a therapist. But it helps because I let out like the flow of the emotion, so and I become present, like, okay, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling, and this is what I can do next.
Yeah. So in your technique, it's actually pretty helpful as well, and I suggest it to some of my clients too. It's somewhat like audio video journaling. So sometimes it gets tricky to write things down, or maybe when you write things down and you read it, maybe sometimes it gets overwhelming. So it's easier to speak.
Yes.
As well.
And then you cringe at yourself.
Yes. Yeah. True.
Yeah.
And then it's totally up to you whether you like to keep it or delete it as well.
Yeah.
If you keep it, then it's like a good thing to look back to, like maybe 6 months from now, a year from now, and to see how much you've progressed as well.
So it's a interesting method for everyone, right? Like different methods, some journaling, some like do the census practices. It depends on what works, right?
Correct. And given that situation as well.
Yeah. That's really helpful. I'm sure a lot of people, this is the first time we had the demonstration in our podcast. And and coming back to the issue, even though we mainly discussed the struggles during and after COVID, the reality is that some people also created good memories during that time, because like we discussed 2 days ago, you asked me what were my mental health challenges. I said I didn't have any mental health challenges during COVID. And I also practiced this podcast with my brother, and I asked him like, okay brother, tell me, what's your mental health challenge during COVID? And he said, I didn't have any mental health challenge. Because some group of people actually enjoy it because they have like closer bonds with their family members. They had their time to spend with their friends and engage with the hobby. And some people even started like a small business. So it's a celebration to some people actually. But then, like you said, then reality hits when you have to go back to your normal routine, right? And how can we maintain that balance between work and personal life this time?
So I want to, again, acknowledge, I think I've been saying that quite a bit today, but it is important. So that it is tricky to find that balance again post-COVID, because even I struggle with it too. For example, I think the pandemic made me re-tapped into my hobby of reading books. So I definitely read a lot of books during the pandemic, but now I struggle to finish one. So again, it's more of keeping in mind what's doable for you and what's something that you're not comfortable doing. So in terms of books, right, instead of telling myself I need to finish a book in a month, I tell myself, okay, I need to finish 2 chapters in a week. So it's that. For some, you might feel like, oh my god, 2 chapters, that's so easy, you can just finish it in 2 minutes. But for me, it's a struggle. So again, this is what is suitable for me.
Right.
And it's keeping that in mind, that whatever you choose to do, be it figuring out how to balance work and life, you should keep that in mind, that it should fit me the best, and what I feel about it matters the most. And then you slowly work around it and work towards it as well.
So it's a process in recognizing and understanding your priorities, right? What do you like? What do you want? And it depends on the person to find the sweet spot and the balance. And ultimately, this thing can also be a topic in itself. And you can discuss this, like you said, with your therapist, or even with like your family members. Like, let's say during the COVID, you get to have like movie night or something, and then you can still have that. It's just a matter of trying to adjust that, scheduling it with how it is now. And and I think that's an amazing advice and lesson. But
I would like to add on as well that I think the pandemic taught us to prioritize ourselves as well, and and to focus on self-care. So maintaining that post-COVID, and again, like you said, finding that sweet spot is just to identify what do you prioritize, and how much of it would you like to include in your schedule in regards to self-care. It is pretty important, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of other people. You can't work effectively, or you can't manage things effectively as well. So that's why you can try and include it in your schedule. It doesn't have to be like a huge chunk. Again, break it down to what's suitable for you. So instead of telling yourself, okay, I'm going to watch a full movie, maybe you can break it down at first. Like, okay, let me just watch until the interval. And you see how it goes as well. And you can add accordingly, or reduce the time accordingly as well. And again, keeping in mind that throughout this whole process of maintaining that balance, that again, you should be kind to yourself and remember that you're not a robot. You can't do everything. It's impossible to be able to juggle so many things at one go, and that it's important to rest as well.
Right. Don't treat as if the task that was the self-care activity turns into, oh, this is the task I need to finish this week. It has to be something that we feel like, oh, this is fun, this is finally I get to spend time again, I get to do my hobby again. It has to be something that's like relaxing, right?
Correct. It should help you de-stress as well, and not add another layer to stress into your life.
And with this transition, like, don't abandon it completely, but also don't try to force it into your daily life, right? Yeah, I think that's great. And before we sort of like end this episode, is there anything else that you would like to add? Let's say maybe someone is trying to get back on their feet and they feel like, oh, I'm starting from square one and I'm kind of scared of start again. Like, what kind of motivation would you say?
Start again in what
start
sense?
Again, like, okay, I start. Like, for example, my friends, like, oh, they start a new semester, or they've stopped from a certain routine that they've kind of abandoned, and then now they have to get back to it, and they feel a bit demotivated. They feel like, oh, I'm not going to be able to overcome this. So what sort of a motivation would you say?
I think what I would say is to not be afraid to seek help. And what I mean by that is, it's not just to trusted friends or loved ones, but recognizing when a professional needs to step in and when you need that help as well from them.
Yeah.
Again, the stigma is still around, but with the pandemic, that sort of softened things a little. That that mental health became a spotlight. That people started talking more about it, and in a good way as well. That it's important to take care of your mental health. So know that it's perfectly okay to seek help when you need it, and all the more, based on today's episode as well, we've realized that the pandemic affected us a lot mentally in very different ways as well. And all the more it's important to be kind with whoever you meet, because we're all struggling with something that no one knows about.
Yeah.
So kindness is very important, and that's something that I would like viewers and listeners to know and to keep in mind, that if it's possible, to treat everyone with kindness. Yeah.
That's a really pleasant and nice advice. And
everyone and yourself. Sorry, that's also important.
And yourself, not just for I have to be nice to everybody, but then you neglect yourself.
So it's finding that sweet spot.
So from what I learned from today's episode is, first, to recognize whatever that you're going through, your emotion or the struggle, and then to if let's say I've processed it, and then I want to act on it, you have to be realistic and don't force yourself into it, right? This is a process. And lastly, don't be afraid to ask help from other people, or whether it's close friends and family, or even the professional themselves. So I think that has been an amazing episode. So a huge thank you to Miss Tapisha for sharing your expertise and knowledge in this mental health world. We've covered a lot, from the challenges during COVID, and then how to reconnect with people, and then overcoming recovering from pandemic itself. So thank you for sharing everything that you've shared today. I'm sure a lot of people would really love.
Thank you for having me, Fauza, and for sharing with me as well.
It
was quite easy to talk to you. So it was
feels quite natural.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
So if any of you feel like you want to get to know a bit more about Tapisha, about Tapisha, I will link her bio in the description. But other than that, you can subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also available on Spotify and Apple Podcast, so you can check out our podcasts on those platforms, and we're also available on most social media platforms. But until next time, take care and bye-bye.